Welcome to the Unit Economics Podcast. I'm Josh Stabinsky. On today's episode, I sit down with Chelsey and Cassie Maschhoff, the co-founders of Lottie's Meats, a company built around a simple idea, making sausage feel like a product worth rethinking. In this conversation, we talk about what they saw when they looked at the category early on, why so much of the sausage aisle felt visually dated and operationally stagnant, and how they set out to build something more modern around whole muscle cuts, a cleaner ingredient list, and a clearer point of view on quality. We get into the early product development process, what it looked like to take recipes that worked in a kitchen and translate them into real production runs, and why the path to market ended up being more complicated than just making a better product. We also spend a lot of time on the actual mechanics of the business, the realities of working with multiple USDA facilities, why meat production creates constraints that a lot of other CPG brands never have to think about, what they learned very quickly about the economics of frozen D2C, and how retail, food service, farmers markets, and pop-ups each served a different purpose in helping them get the company off the ground. This is a conversation about category positioning, supply chain complexity, and what it really takes to build a premium product in a part of the store where consumers are used to thinking mostly about price. I learned so much from Chelsey and Cassie, and I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. Chelsey and Cassie, thank you both so much for taking the time to do this today. If you wouldn't mind just starting with a brief background on yourselves, that would be great.
Yeah, I am Chelsey Maschhoff, Cassie's older and wiser sister. I got started, at 3 years old, deciding that I wanted to be a chef one day, and I was just too stubborn to ever change my mind. So lo and behold, went into culinary, and yeah, it was a great time. But as we know, it literally is a grind. Was talking to Cassie just about what's next. It's not sustainable to do it forever, especially when you're a woman in the industry and want to start a family. And so just got started talking to her about what the next steps were. And I think we both kind of decided together that a product brand would be the best for us. So I'll let Cassie tell you how she got there.
Yeah, I did not know what I wanted to do when I was little, and or still don't really know, but I fell into tech. I spent the first almost 10 years of my career working in big tech, doing a lot of different things and wearing a lot of different hats. And also towards the end of that time was doing a part-time business school program where I was doing some CPG kind of consulting on the side, where I discovered more of what is CPG. But lo and behold, we'll get into this, did not know at all what CPG was until you're actually in it. But while Chelsey was doing some experimenting with what is now Lottie sausages, I was helping her kind of on the side, and that brought us together.
What was the problem that you saw in the market that led you to think there's something here?
Yeah, I think for me, I was telling Cassie, and we kind of make a joke of it, I don't like sausage. I would never buy it at a grocery store. I thought the texture was off. The flavors were kind of uninspiring. And there's just a sort of mistrust with it that I didn't really like. Being in restaurants, I got to kind of break down half hogs and learn the anatomy of it and what cuts would make the best for grinding and that fat to meat ratio. And playing around with what absorbs the best spices and what goes together gave me this idea of, okay, how can we make pork sausage more of a thing and in everyone's kind of rotation for dinner or lunch or breakfast? I created, a couple different things and was always trying to tweak and make it better, and finally brought some home, I think, one time and made Cassie try some. And I think that's where the idea really took off of, wow, could this be something that we put on shelves and that people are interested in and excited about? And that's kind of where the idea started from.
I'd add that then when we looked at the actual data of what's in the market right now, and the sausage market, it's like $1 billion market that's dominated by chicken sausage, which is a very functional food. It's high protein, clean, but the taste isn't always there. And so pairing that with Chelsey's chef background and our background growing up on a pork farm, where we're well, pork is really underrepresented here, or where it's kind of the same commodity big brands. There probably is something there that would make the Chelseys who aren't buying sausage want to. And so there was a new consumer that we thought we could capture and add to the category. So we did have a plan, even though we don't always, but it helped to like see some of the white space on paper as well.
Talk to me a bit about what it was like to grow up on the farm. And I'm curious to know about what benefits that introduces, as well as some constraints or some things that might be surprising to people that you have to work through.
The benefits of growing up on a farm is a lot of grit and resilience that you need in CPG to be to survive. We grew up in the, not to date us, but Chelsey already said she's my older sister. We grew up in the 90s. So big meat was very much like forming and changing. So over the course of our lifetimes, we saw the farm that we grew up on. We're sixth generation, by the way, change so much. But I think we learned a lot about the importance of community, and so many people that we grew up that were maybe like employee number one at the farm are still there, 30, 40 years later. So a lot of like how much adding to that community and like family farming is important to rural communities, and then leaving the farm, like how much so much of that has gone away. And so that I think is really important to us now, wanting to still source from US family farms, because we know the economic opportunity that it can create and how difficult it is now.
Yeah. I think for me especially, and I'm sure Cassie is the same way, being out on the East Coast, but when I went to culinary school out on the West Coast, there is such a disconnect and lack of communication that you see in rural communities. Like in rural communities, you're driving past farms every single day, and like everyone is in ag, whether it's a dairy farm, pork production, cattle, like it's just surrounded by us. And then as you get into bigger cities, that's not in their first forethought. So it provides us an opportunity to have that communication and connection now that we're doing Lottie's.
When you were just starting to look at what was on the market and you saw that there was clearly an opportunity there, did anything speak to you around the packaging and how the meat was actually being presented as well? Like, was it purely like a functional and sort of like taste thing, or was there something to like the way in which the meat was being presented that was also calling to you?
As you can imagine, it was a lot of masculine, same kind of color, branding, same sort of flavors, but also, yeah, nobody is calling out whole muscle cuts like we do. We say 100% pork shoulder, for instance. But you'll notice if you haven't already, when you do look at the sausage aisle now, it's never quite clear how the sausage is made, and or there's often a long ingredient list that is words I can't pronounce. Chelsey, you probably can.
Cassie nailed it. It's calling out those whole muscle cuts like pork loin and shoulder, and just leading with a very clean ingredient list.
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing, Josh, that we tried to do when we were, again, no experience trying to come up with our packaging, we very much were coming from tech. I worked with a friend that was like a UX designer. We were designing it like for screen, not for shelf. Just a lot of things in hindsight I wish we would have done or known. But one thing Chelsey and I always talked about that we were intentional about is a lot of the current sausage labels and meat products for that matter are very much like, know this, know this, know this, like not. And we were like, let's talk about what this is full of. That's another reason why we wanted to lead with pork. It's such a rich source of vitamins and iron and zinc that we don't talk about. And this is full of real Calabrian chilies, for instance, and raw garlic. We're not using powders. So we tried to stay away from like all of the anti-no and be like, instead of free from, this is full of X, Y, and Z ingredients that you have and no.
Talk to me a bit about what the decision to quit your job and go full time on this looked like. At what point did you know it's time?
I had a panic attack. And I know when I decided to quit, I was like, oh my gosh, is this the way? I think for me, working in big tech, I left beginning of 2024, which tech has been in a weird place the last few years. Our entire economy has. I think there was just a piece of, Chelsey mentioned this earlier, she was working on Lottie's as a pop-up experience and brought some sausage home to try. And I think there was this perfect inflection point of me trying that and like moving from cheerleader to like, whoa, could this be a real thing? And also just spending a decade in corporate America, having that conversation we did earlier when we were mapping out some of those things and being like, wow, it's now or never. But also, is there enough of a realistic plan for us to do this and take the risk and like move it into these avenues? And so it is very much like the hardest and scariest decision I made, leaving like my dream job on paper, but also now 2 years, I would not change it for the world. And it's coming from a place of privilege, working a decade and having the means to do that. But Chelsey, I know you you even leaving full-time executive chef was a big decision because that's also like your whole identity. And both of us leaving, I think, at this point in your career is like a different thing than like maybe doing this after like 2 years of work experience. Like it's just a formidable, challenging time.
Yeah, I think also it's different for me, obviously, but in culinary, you have to be so present and at the source. You can't ever work from home, or like it's very much your boundary is there. And then you have your work life balance, but you also have limited vacation, limited family time. So for me, it was all about freedom. Yes, there were scary things, but I saw this as an opportunity to have more flexibility and set my own schedule and have that opportunity to kind of work remote or from home and have that versatility. So that was really cool for me.
Talk to me a little bit about what the first production run looked like when you were ready to like actually start getting sausage in hand. What did that actually look like?
I think co-packing in itself has been the hardest. I mean, we went door to door and just called people and asked them if this is something they'd be willing to do. We had no idea about the amounts or pounds, and then scaling those recipes to a larger run was just a nightmare in itself because these were worked out and scaled in kitchens. So everything was in grams, and then you have to do ratios. And I was like, I'm not a mathematician. But the first run, I felt decently good about. We partnered with a small facility here in Denver. The lead on that came from a culinary background, so he helped me kind of understand why they do things a certain way, what we can use instead of this, and keep it all natural and very clean the way we wanted to. It wasn't perfect, but it was an exciting time, I guess.
In that first run, we picked up, I think it was, we had 2 fully cooked sausage links and we have 2 raw ground pork seasoned blends. So that first run was just the 2 fully cooked sausage links. And I think we picked them up March 1st in Chelsea's Jeep Cherokee, which is not like a regulated.
Yeah, you're not allowed to do that.
You're not allowed to do that. But we picked up like 30 cases of each, I think, remember? And we were like, whoa, this is big time. We dropped them off at like 4 retailers around Denver and we're like, okay, guess we're launched.
So you got into retail immediately. It wasn't D2C to start.
Correct. We thought we would do more D2C, but then, and I'm sure we'll get into this, Josh, we were like, whoa, the undertaking of shipping a frozen brand and the economics of that are like, whoa, tricky. So we actually started with food service first because of Chelsea's background and network in Denver, which is where the brand is based. We started, I think, Chelsea, with like Get Right's Bakery, which is still one of our top customers and so elite for anyone who's ever in Denver. And then I think because Chelsea had done pop-ups with like some of these cooked sausages, we were able to like drop off samples to stores, and we were doing pop-ups on the side to help cash flow the business. We've always been bootstrapped. I'm also always super candid about this, put in, I think, like $10,000 for our first year so that we could fund like this production run to buy all of the pork and everything. But we were doing pop-ups where people could pick up and like do drops and packs. So we kind of had a little D2C business, but food service, mini D2C, and then a few local retailers.
Yeah, I'm really interested to learn more about the actual economics, specifically when you talk about D2C involving the cold chain, involving perishable goods like sausage versus retail. In whatever detail you can share with me, can you explain like what you learned in that regard? And yeah, I don't know if there are any surprises along the way.
So when we started doing D2C, the biggest thing, there's so many costs. We have dry ice. We didn't want to ship in like styrofoam. We're already a meat company. We're really cognizant of our footprint and we want to be as responsible and offset our impact where we can as possible. So we wanted to use like recyclable or compostable materials where we could in our value chain. So there's obviously a cost to that. And we needed to ship everything in 1 or 2 days. So there was a lot of restrictions with cost of labels. And so it took us a lot of time with finding the best materials, finding the best box size, and then figuring out how to bundle so that people could order it less, and have less of a footprint that way, but also make the economics work so that if we're building in cost of dry ice, cost of recyclable thermal liners, boxes, fulfillment, fees, that the economics would work. We've heard a lot of brands, and we didn't want to be a brand that would be just selling online just to sell online for awareness. We just like weren't in that place where we could afford. We wanted to make it semi profitable for us. So how that translates in person is if you do get a sausage that's like 13 or 13.50 on our website, some of those costs are baked in. We try to absorb as much of the shipping versus on shelf you might find us for $9.99 or $10.99. So there's like a little bit of that premium baked into an online order.
Going back to being bootstrapped, we did try to outsource fulfillment at one point, and we just realized that even adds even more cost to not only ourselves, but the consumer. And so we recently brought that back in-house, but you just don't know as a new CPG brand of like what's going to be beneficial to you in your time. And so, you might have to like dip your toe in that water, but for us, it just didn't make sense at this point.
You kind of have to test and figure out what is the customer's willingness to pay for something like this. Like sometimes, again, Chelsey and I probably talk to deprecating. I'm like, who needs this much sausage? Who wants to buy like 12 packs of sausage? But people do. And we are really trying to be disciplined and strategic with regionally where we're available for same cost limitations with shipping cold chain. I know you've talked to a lot of like yogurt and like Labna brands that we love, and there's just limitations. And so for us, we're like, okay, well, we want direct to consumer to be available because we will only be in certain regions. And so we know that customer's willingness to pay is maybe a little bit more. And so it did take us some time, I think, to like get to this price point and had like a top down and kind of like test approach that's helpful to just go through.
Yeah. I'm really interested to know more about pricing in general. I love talking about pricing. So you're using better for you ingredients, right? Which is going to drive up your costs. You're trying to use sustainable materials in your packaging where possible, which is going to drive up your costs. And my understanding is that you're also 1% for the Planet brand as well. Is that correct? And so that's going to eat away at some of your margin. And I love all of these things, right? Like as a consumer who cares about this stuff, I love hearing all these things. And I am more likely to support a brand that does all this stuff. But I'm wondering if it's possible to pinpoint, like at what scale do the economics like work for, let's say, a sausage brand that cares about all these things and is investing in all the things I just listed?
I'll say, yeah, there's a certain scale, but there has to be a channel mix and a weight that makes sense and a distribution versus direct weight that makes sense. But to your question and where we're getting now as we grow, we're like, wow, so much of the growth and the synergies are coming in bigger distributors, bigger retail, bigger cost. We've been so fortunate, I think, in our first almost 2 years in business to have a really strong direct distribution model, as Chelsey said, direct fulfillment, food service, which is like 20% of our business, better margins. You don't have to pay for extra packaging costs, some of these things. And then with direct to consumer, not having, it's mostly just like organic word of mouth for where it once that's like 15% of our business. So we do get worried about looking in the future and like, okay, yeah, if a lot of the checks are coming from big retail, bigger distributors, what does that mean for us? Because we do have a fragile margin and supply chain. And sometimes, again, when we're being too negative, I'm like, oh, CPG is just a bad business. Like we can't be a traditional CPG brand. We can't be a traditional CPG meat brand. We have to play in other channels and do other like revenue streams, like pop-ups and merch and things like that, just because it's impossible.
It's so impressive to me, though, when you look at like your store locator on your site and you look at, I think you have like roughly 100 accounts at this point. Correct me if that number's wrong, but it seems like you've scaled rapidly over a really short period of time. So there's something working, and fragile as the system might be, I do think there's validation. I'm wondering what it's looked like to scale to this point so quickly, and if anything broke down along the way, and maybe what lessons you can, impart in that regard.
We are actually almost in 300 doors, but across like retail and food service. And we're about to like double in the next few months. But so many things have broken along the way and they're still breaking. Like today, a few things broke. I think there's been times where because we're in such a traditional industry and it's like very legacy system dominated, very male dominated. In the beginning, I think like when Chelsey mentioned that first like boutique amazing partner we were working with, they were so expensive. In a way, it gave us, we had to like start pricing super premium and super high. Someone gave me advice once of like, you can always lower your price, but it's really hard to raise it. And so sometimes I think our first store, we were on shelf at like $14.99 or something. But I think we're both really quick learners and really solution oriented. And we learned so much from some of those legacy conversations that I'm getting at. It's like we became like very good negotiators, and we always tried to show the value prop and like, look, if you work with us, even though we're small, here's the consumer we're bringing in, here's the value we're going to add, here's the scale we know we can get to, and like, here's what we're willing to do. I say that almost like in a joking way because sometimes Chelsea's like, we'll give you Cassie's like firstborn child. I'm like, well, we're not. We're willing to do both. But I think to our credit, knowing how tough the supply chain and like the game, so to speak, is, we've like really held true to like, okay, these are some of like the product margins we have to keep. And like, what are the other things we've learned that we know we can use as leverage and figure out along the way. So I think we've been really ruthless in that regard, and we've been disciplined. Like, we're not saying yes to everything. Like, if, let's say, Myers or Kroger, there's been some of these conversations, we can't be $7.99 or $8.99 at shelf. Like, we're just not that brand, but we've been really selective with where the synergies are and where we know the velocity will come. And that's like enabled us to then catapult, even though there's been months where we're like, oh, I feel like growth is slow. Should we have said yes? But that discipline and like that just comes with the experience, even though I'm like, I don't feel like we're experienced. But now 2 years in, Chelsey, don't you feel like we're like a tween CPG brand?
I think it's always reassuring when bigger companies or people who have been in the CPG space for a long period of time commend us on growing organically, region by region, not, going out with a bang, but just adding building blocks. Yeah, they're like, you're doing it the smart way, because it's so easy to get starry-eyed and say yes when bigger retailers come to you and they're like, oh, this is great, I want to bring you in. But we were always very conscious of growing our production and our co-packers. We started out small, then we went middle tier. Now, like, we're still in that middle tier range, but finding the right one who could scale with us to keep the quality there, to keep costs in.
Yeah. And I would say key, not to interrupt you, but I do think this
No,
is
you're
important for any CPG brands that are in this kind of messy middle. A lot of it came down to distribution, and we, like, us saying no to the UNFI and KHEs, and still like we work with 7 or 8 regional distributors, and we're able to go negotiate instead of, okay, we have to accept this is 25%. We can meet them at 12, or we can like protect our margin. Or there's just things that it felt sad to be like, okay, so we're not going to launch into KHE, but it saved us and enabled us, to get here.
Yeah, I think that's such a good lesson. So what does it look like then to scale from 300 to 600 doors? What needs to change?
Well, we've started to like outsource more, which is good. Usually it was just, this is the team you're looking at. But we've worked with like an operations consultant to help us with some demand planning and synergies on the supply chain when it comes to freight efficiencies, storage efficiencies. We work with like 2 different cold storage facilities, but that's been really helpful just to like get ahead of some of those things. And I think so much of what will change is like a lot of the support needed on the execution side. Like, we've only really been in like we always say like real retail. I don't know, Chelsea, like maybe a year. Like, our first year,
Yeah.
March 2024 to March 2025, was small independents in Colorado. Then it wasn't until maybe summer last year that we started launching into like Bristol Farms, Deerberg's, Lady Acres. So I feel like then now we're learning, well, this is how heavy it is to like execute. It's going to be on like executing at store level, and managing is like where a lot of the lift will come.
Yeah, I agree. Because doing those smaller, I mean, here in Colorado, Cassie and I were able to always be in the stores, collect data straight from, the meat manager, be in there for founder-led demos. And now that we are expanding, it's how much can we still control that narrative rather than either outsource it or kind of rely on the stores themselves to help move our product.
I'm curious to hear more about how you think about the introduction of new SKUs. So you started with 2, and like you said, you have 4 now. How do you know when it's time to greenlight a new SKU? And how do you think about not cannibalizing your existing business?
This is something we've been talking a lot about because I think initially by year 2, we were excited and ready to launch a new SKU. But as we are growing and constantly trying to find that right co-packer, for me at least on the production side, we need to have a very sturdy supply chain from the farm to the co-packing and to once that gets all narrowed in, I feel so much better about releasing a SKU. But I feel so many people cave into that pressure of, okay, I'll just launch something and then it's still all discombobulated. So at least that's where, I don't know, Cassie, we're still battling it out.
Mhm. Yeah, we literally, yeah, have been talking about this so much, and we're just talking about it today because it's tricky, and we are so focused, and we know we'll stick within pork, sausage, like some cooked products and some grinds, but to not cannibalize so many flavors overlap. What are we hearing from consumers versus what do we really want? Versus like Chelsea is so high on quality bar, like what is scalable, with certain flavors and ingredients, and then yeah, what is realistic to like put out there that isn't just another, I don't know what the most common, like everyone's like spicy Italian link or do your breakfast sausage like this or blah, blah, blah. So we are trying to stick to our brand ethos of like elevated spins on classic with more on trend, clean, fun ingredients. And I think we'll get another one out there, but we're also like, it wouldn't be, I think, to Chelsea's point, for sake of just getting it out there in another revenue stream. It needs to be something that like, yeah, makes sense.
I realized in doing research for this episode that I know nothing about sausage.
Us either, honestly.
I don't know much about meat. So I'm a vegetarian. I don't really know anything about meat. And I'm really curious to hear about, and I was debating whether or not to use this pun, but how the sausage is made. I would love to hear about the actual supply chain, like from absolute start to sausage on plate. What does that look like?
So we source from U.S. family farms. We work with like a network of our family farm operations. And going back to the sustainability of what we want to do and what our legacy should be, we are sourcing from like open pen gestation and really conscious of where meat should be headed rather than where meat has been in the past.
Yeah, and quickly, can you explain what open pen gestation actually is for listeners who might not be familiar with the term?
Yeah, it's like on a sow farm, like where pigs are born, the sows are not kept in small like gestation crates. It's more open housing in like a certain regulation. So often certain grocery stores we're working with, like if we were talking to Sprouts, for instance, they might have an animal welfare standard that states that.
That's where it starts. We then go to a processing plant where they will break down the carcass and we get our whole muscle cuts from that facility. It then goes to a co-packing manufacturer, which is what you need to be in retail. So it has the USDA bug, a USDA guide is there on site constantly checking. That just ensures that you as a consumer can guarantee that you're not going to get sick. Everything is running and operating at cleanly levels and adheres to all the guidelines that we set. That's where we process both our ground products. So we have one USDA facility for our ground product, and then we use another one for our cooked product. Again, I think that's where in CPG, a lot of people are like, whoa, you have two co-manufacturers that you are constantly checking in on. But with meat, you kind of want to keep those two facilities separate. And so we learned that early on. We thought we could find a facility that did all of the above, and here we are. So from there, it goes to our cold storage facilities. We keep all of our product frozen. We use those kind of as hubs regionally. And so there's one here in Denver and one in the Midwest coast, close to our co-packing manufacturer. And then from there, it gets picked up either from retail or D2C or at your local farmer's market.
What misconceptions do you think people have about sausage in general?
I think in general, it used to be made, and it should, the basis of sausage is it's everything but the squeak, as they like to say. And so a lot of offals, there's cartilages, just weird things going in there. And for us, we realized the best way to get a good product is by using only the best cuts and then things that aren't fillers. Like so many people, Cassie and I learned, will add water. The crazy thing for me is so many people ask if it's gluten-free, and I didn't realize how many people were putting gluten into their sausage just to, keep that weight up, keep certain things. And so it's just been really eye-opening to see how much actually goes into sausage that people are unaware of.
And a challenge for us with that is because sausage is such a traditional, it's been around for hundreds of years. And as Chelsey said, rightfully so, how the sausage has been made has been sustainable in the fact that you can upcycle and use everything. And for us, we grew up on a pork farm. Part of this was like wanting to reintroduce pork in a way that's accessible, but also like delicious and convenient. And sausage is a mechanism for that. So our challenge is it's often thought of like commodity and really, really low priced. So to have the premium, like a clean version of it is a challenge, like an education challenge. But there is a consumer that does want that and enjoys cooking with it and enjoying it. So it's more of like, how can we complement, the rest of the sausage category is being like still supporting and growing the category with just like a new offering for a new consumer.
Are there any brands out there that you look to for inspiration that have done sort of what you're describing in their respective field? So, reintroducing a product that people might have a sort of preconceived notion about that needs to be reframed. And as a result, the price point might be elevated.
I think there's so many. I mean, that's like a lot of maybe even brands you talk to now that are doing it well that we really like are the brands that are just keeping it simple. So I don't know about like, wow, disrupting a whole category because maybe that came, 5, 6 years before us when like Fishwife was really disrupting like tinned fish, or like graza and olive oil. But I think now today are like a lot of brands that have become friends, some of which you've had on the podcast, like One Trick Pony and just like really simple. These are the two ingredients and this is like a really nice way to play on shelf. Or we often talk about Huxley, which Simon, the founder, also went to Culinary Institute of America, where Chelsey went, and he has like just a really nice, natural, clean energy drink. Or a lot of yogurt brands that are like we always get compared to Painterland sisters because they're two sisters in a farm. But they're just using clean, all natural ingredients. And so I think any brands today that are kind of doing that in a way that's it's more expensive, but at least it's in like there's a trust component and like a heritage story component we like really respect and even as consumers like just love.
It's the trust and traceability that a lot of brands are leading with now.
Yeah, all great answers, all great brands. I'm curious to know about how much data you have around when customers are trying your product for the first time or your products for the first time. What specifically is resonating most with them on shelf? Do you have a clear answer as to what specific factor, like what differentiating factor it is?
Yeah, I think they're really blown away by the texture. It's not dry and crumbly. It's a nice, smooth, bouncy almost texture. And the flavor, we get this a lot with our brat, is very clean and it's not as high in sodium as other brats. And so they're very happy that they can just taste all of the ingredients, but the quality of the pork, I think, really shines through.
Yeah. So whenever we can drive trial and do demos and like we're in store, we've learned so much and it's awesome because it converts. But as you know, demos are expensive and hard to scale. I think when people are just picking it up on shelf, I once saw someone recently in the wild do this and I awkwardly walked up to him and I'm like, that's my sister's brand. Like, I'm just curious why you grabbed that pack in like this sea of huge sausage wall. It was at Berkeley Bowl and it was like, they have like a whole wall of like sometimes I can't even find our package in there. And he was like, oh, I was just looking for like a ground, like a spicy Italian. This really popped out. We try to use like bright colors, like I said earlier, keep it simple. And he's like, oh, and I like, he just turned it around. He's like, and this looks like great. So sometimes I think, the blessing of being in such a big category is it's familiar. Like we're not reinventing anything, but it's hopefully differentiated enough from what else is out there that people are like, oh, I was looking for something like this and this stands out or pops enough or like has this attribute enough. That helps.
Yeah. What do you think the most defensible aspect of the business is? What's to prevent somebody else from coming in and trying to replicate what you're doing?
I think it will be hard, not impossible, because there's only so many big meat brands. So yeah, what is stopping them from doing this? But I think it is going to be hard for other legacy institutional sausage brands to change their model to start using better cuts in the way that we are. Oftentimes, a lot of meat and sausage brands have entire product lines. Like you'll see, for instance, I don't know, Nyman Ranch that has bacon, sausage, maybe some of these cuts. So those cuts are more expensive, and that's where the dollars are going to be. So their business models, are just a little bit different. They're not going to reinvest that in sausage. So I think that is one thing that's defensible. Plus, the chef crafted nature and the uniqueness and the story and the brand that's very much different. I just don't see, hopefully, a lot of sausage brands having that incentive to like really lean in and compete there because it's expensive. And if they're probably already winning in other places. But what do you think, Chelsea? Am I the defensible piece?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
basically Cassie. No
I
one
think
else
it's
has a
me.
Cassie.
No one else has Cassie. No, it's definitely not me. It's actually you.
No, I
you're the
really just
chef.
don't think anyone is crazy enough to
Yeah, that's a
there's
good
been
point.
so many times that we could have thrown in the towel. Like production runs don't go as smoothly and they overcook your product or they throw an entire plastic bucket of Calabrian chilies into your product. And like there's just so many things that I don't think enough people would keep going and a lot of no's. It's just a lot of grind. And so I think there are people out there that do that, but yeah, I hope no one's as crazy as us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. The barrier to entry for a meat brand is different than a traditional CPG brand because there's only so many USDA facilities. Getting a raw material that's coming from a live commodity it's tough. I am always curious, like, else would come in and enter this space because it is like, maybe it's not coveted, as Chelsea said, you kind of have to be crazy. I don't know. What do you think?
So, I mean, I agree with everything you've said, but there's a level of distrust that I have for big meat, big X, right? All these massive conglomerates that I think a lot of people also have developed a sort of distrust for as well. And if I saw a massive player in the space start doing what you were doing, I don't think it would actually resonate well with me. And I would be really skeptical. And I would think that they're just greenwashing or they're just, they're just playing the sort of trends. And I'm wondering how you think about building and maintaining trust in this space with your consumers.
Yeah, I think it was like one of the things I was so worried about when starting this brand because, as Chelsea said, I'm on the East Coast now. She went to culinary school on the West Coast. So I used to live on the West Coast. But like leaving rural America, where, as Chelsea mentioned at the top of this chat, like it's so much the culture and what everybody knows is agriculture and however that looks and however you define it, good or bad, fragile, strong, like big player, small player, whatever. But then, yeah, it is just like so much of the meat industry and food system has evolved so much and it's so complex and it's really sensitive and it's really hard to do right. And like cancel culture is such a big thing. And I was just telling Chelsea, I'm like, yeah, we grew up and like we're not the experts in like how do we do this? And I think the only thing that we have now since learned is we're just trying to be so open and honest about it and saying, look, there is this like it's so subjective what animal raising good or like sustainable is for everybody because not everybody can afford a backyard, like upstate New York, gorgeous piece of whatever. And like if that mortality rate is different or if that cost, like if it's raised in Australia and moved over here, like, the definitions are just so subjective. And I think what the approach we've always taken that makes me feel better is this is what we know. This is the system we're playing in. How can we be as responsible and transparent and have conversations like this as possible so that more people can understand and make their own opinions and like buy what they want? Like, I think we're also always like when we think about what we want Lottie's to be, it's so much rooted in like community and family and like conversation and like chef crafted celebrations. And it's not necessarily rooted in like, we want to be the next big meat brand in every fridge. Like sometimes I'm like, wait, shouldn't say that because no investors will ever look at us, but we don't. Like we just don't have, it should be localized and regionalized and it should be that connection wherever you can find it. And so to wrap it up, it's like, yeah, it's really hard to know. And like we always worry about that. But I think we just have to try to be as honest about it as possible and open it up for conversation.
Having that direct link to family farms has been really strong for us. And we're proud to support them and back them and let people know, like, so and so grew this.
And I think that's where there's opportunity. And it is like so challenging. Like, we will pay a premium to only work with these farms, but at least it's like, okay, at least this is a step in the right direction. Like, a lot of these farms will have to, like every other duopoly or monopoly in our system, like have to play this way. But even if we're 0.00001% that can like slowly maybe encourage one behavior, great, it's a step. But it's hard when everything becomes so polarizing, I guess is my point. Like, it can't be. That's nothing will ever change.
Yeah, I really appreciate the transparency, and I think it comes across very clearly. What is fundraising looking like? How are you thinking about fundraising? And if you were to receive a substantial injection of capital, what would you deploy it on first?
We, especially as we grow and like double our footprint, we're like, wow, now more than ever, we need it, even just for inventory and like producing to support these launches, knowing that we're going to get paid later. So we're in the process now of like trying to get a line of credit, which is helping tide us over. But so much of it, I think, then would be used on supporting store launches and execution and like some of the marketing and nice to haves that surround that. We need to figure out if we're going to formally raise or not. We're trying to do as much as we can because of everything we've talked about, I think, on this call, of like trying to keep it authentic and not traditional to us. And most traditional VCs and our funders want you to play that game. So I don't know.
Yeah, it lends itself more scary to me. I know there are so many upsides and benefits to it, but it also, they control some of the narrative of launching in a SKU if we're not ready and that production line is not stable, or, being in certain places that we're not ready for. So I think, yeah, Cassie and I are always, what is that balance?
Yeah. It's good though that I know Chelsea's afraid of this because I'm like, okay, well then we have to like get all these food service customers by summer. You don't want to raise? Well, you have to
Yeah.
raise yourself.
Yeah. Good incentives.
Do you think about a scenario where you wind up creating a brand for yourself, sort of in the way that Impossible has, where like you see Lottie's on a menu, made with Lottie's, and that attracts a customer, let's say at a restaurant? Is that something you think about at all?
Yeah, totally. And it's like been actually like a part of our strategy because it's nice brand contextualization, especially when it can be relevant.
What does it look like to get a restaurant to commit to that then?
We're very lucky in that regard. I think a lot of CPG brands would love to be in more food service and like be on menus. And it's really hard because, as Chelsea can speak to, being a chef, you're wearing so many hats. You're getting hit up by reps all the time. I think because we have a strong product and have been building hopefully that brand moat, restaurants are like inclined sometimes to put it in there. We tried to be like, we'll do menu consultation, we'll do co-marketing and just try to lend what value we can create. But it's definitely something we would love to do more. And you have to be selective about it because you don't want to end up on the wrong menus.
You have to look at it as brand building for both operations. And I think for our product, the ingredients itself kind of lends itself to being utilized a lot in different we're in bakeries, we're in pizzerias, we're in a few upscale breweries. And so we have a product that kind of lends itself to everything from morning to night, which has been really beneficial.
And we've heard from customers like time and time again, oh, we discovered you at X place or we saw you. And so then we bought it. And so it was a hypothesis, but we hear it more than we thought, which is awesome.
What is something that you've changed your mind about since starting Lottie's?
I think we've been realistic, I think, about, we didn't know like how hard it would be, of course, but we knew it would be hard and we knew the category would be hard. And so I think we've changed our mind about like what this will look like, as we've kind of alluded to, like this won't be a traditional CPG brand because it can't. And so I think some of the economics have changed about it. And I think we've become more realistic about, it can't be the two of us, and like here are the places that we need to start and continue outsourcing in. So we're always kind of changing like, okay, what will this look like in a year or 2 years? When we started it, we're like, maybe we'll do this for a year, probably won't last.
I think that tees up my final question perfectly, which is, where do you see Lottie's 2 to 5 years from now? And where do you see trends in the sausage industry and in the meat industry broadly heading over that time as well?
I'll start with the reverse because we just came back from the meat conference, as I was telling you earlier. And one thing that the meat conference does so well is there's a ton of consumer data and insights that are super helpful for a small sausage brand like us. And one of them, I don't know, it's really been interesting that meat is growing so much and alternative meat is shrinking so much. And it's not that consumers want less meat, they just want better meat. And so that's been really reassuring because I think they are looking to the brands that are sourcing responsibly, better cuts, better quality, maybe more value added, like pre-seasoned, maybe like hybrid blends, like you've heard a lot about that. But some of the over processed and alternative meat, it just continues to shrink for better or for worse. So that just gives me hope in the category that hopefully players will continue to make better choices and better products that are overall better, however you define that, but like better for consumers and our well-being. And so that gives me hope for seeing the category as a whole grow and hopefully change for the better. For us, I think we'll continue to like hit on some of those things that we mentioned. Like we want to grow as sustainably but aggressively as possible, which I know is like wishful thinking. But I think growing regionally with well-established partners, whether that is a retail partner, whether that is like we just started in some general stores and like auto camps and like camping sites, but like trying to be creative about other like off-premise and on-premise accounts that aren't necessarily just a Walmart shelf or something. And so I think that we'll try to continue to like have partners that we can like call community friends as well. We'll always be, I think, a lean and scrappy team just by nature of also what we talked about. Like we don't have incredible product margins and cash that we can just like hire so much, but we will want to keep growing our team so that it's not just the two of us. I think we learned the hard way that means like sustainability for the brand, not like burning out and crashing out, which I tend to do. So definitely some of that. And then I think the third bucket would be some of that product diversification, not outside of pork, because there's so much of that will always be true to us. But whether it is, different like adjacent products or complementary products, that will be interesting. But hopefully you'll see more of that.
Thank you both so much for the time. I learned so much. I'm such a big fan of the way you're building the business, and I'm excited to follow along, and I'm rooting for you both.
You're so kind. Well, thank you. This was really, really fun for us as well. And we always appreciate, as we said, like getting down to the economics and literally everything. So thanks for having us. And yeah, we're always welcome to more chats like this.
Awesome. I'd love to have you back on. And if you want to share with listeners where they can find Lottie's, please feel free to do so.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So you can find us online at our site, lottiesmeats.com. We ship everywhere, but our store locator is there. We're primarily in stores in Colorado and then Pacific Northwest, NorCal, and SoCal. You can follow a lot of our behind the scenes chaos on Instagram at Lottie's Meats.
Highly recommend it. Thank you again so much. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you can stay up to date with the latest episodes. Thanks for listening.